Okay, good afternoon. I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation. It seems so convivial and so, with its beautiful weather and without other means of transportation, I guess we go to the mine. Okay, so I made a mistake last time when I announced the subject of this lecture. When I spoke, we will deal with our third theme to announce in the general title of the series, the beautiful, the sublime, and the uncanny. Well, the uncanny we'll deal with next time. There is one little subject that I wanted to treat before. I thought it in the little pamphlet, proportion. I had first thought of the nude and all that, and I finally, you will see what who cares the titles? You will see what I want to treat today. We have, that's it. We have one more avenue to explore. And you remember last time we spoke of the sublime and of the beautiful. And the two themes, of course, could go together like many people of the 18th century, let's say, will make treatises on the beautiful and the sublime, as the two things could go together. But I suggested that there was a kind of difficulty with that because beauty is associated habitually with form and sublime with inform or with non-form. And when we are confronted to kind of chaotic type of view, too grand to be grasped in one at once, if you want, or too powerful to be reduced to one concept. And in that sense, it was suggesting that maybe we begin to think that the world is less a cosmos, meaning something orderly, harmonious, created by God, and more chaotic, more difficult to grasp as if it was very harmonious and easy to understand and all that. And, but there was one little sector that for a long time, let's say, artists tried to save. And it could have been a refuge to the concept of beauty, or it could have been seen like almost, I would say, a microcosmos, meaning a little cosmos, microcosmos, a little world. And this little world is the human body, of course. This idea, of course, we get from the Greeks, from a very long time ago. Greeks were crazy about sport and gymnastics. They loved it like, I would say, any reader of Journal Montréal. They were very enthusiastic about that. And the very word gymnastic comes from the Greek gymnazein, who means to exercise your body. But in gymnazein, in the word gymnazein, you have the adjective gymnos, who means naked. And for them, it was evident that the first thing you do when you make gymnastics is you undress. Because clothes could be an hindrance to your spontaneous movement. And so gymnastics is done naked. And the Roman on this had a very different attitude. They find it very shocking and disgusting. And the proper way for a Roman elite, let's say, to dress, especially men, it was with a toga, and trying to make sport with a toga. They were not liking sport much. They like war, and that's why probably in their arena, what you were saying, it was not sportive competition, but fight to death between gladiators, or in my childhood, we used to go to the wax museum, and we were shown always the Christian being eaten by lions. So that was a spectacle that the Roman liked, something bloody, something closer to war than to sport. So their attitudes are very, very different on that. In the contrary, for the Greeks, the idea of nakedness in sport, in gymnastics, was very natural. And so they developed this idea that there is a kind of special beauty in the human body, naked, but a masculine naked body. they are, Greeks are a lot macho, I would say, if I try to describe them. For instance, girls were not allowed to exercise in the gymnasium. Even at the Olympics, of the Olympic Games, the married women were prohibited to go because they decided that the sight of so many naked men could be shocking for them. Sometimes I asked myself if it was a worry of the husband that the wife would make comparison. Anyway, I don't know exactly, but the official reason was that married women should not go to the Olympics because there's too much naked men in front of them. This was not true in Sparta, the rival city of Athens, where in the contrary, girls were permitted to make athletics, and they were even expected to take part in war, and it was a very different type of attitude on this. I thought of trying to illustrate that with one painting only of Degas, who is in youth, I would say, was tempted to make what he called historical painting. And like it was, of course, the fashion at the time, and he had this idea of showing young Spartans with girls challenging the boys in front of their parents who are in the background there. He reduced, of course, the landscape to almost nothing, so it could be any place, and it was a pretext to make these two groups of nude people, if you want, and also only Degas could imagine Greeks of the antiquity with the head of little bums of Paris. They look like a little skinhead of the time. Anyway, and but this is exactly the subject and of Sparta, where it was conceivable, you see, to have girls and boys naked competing each other in athletics. When you go to Athens proper, what you see is rather what is depicted here on this crater. Crater is a kind of vase, as you know, with red figure, which is a style that was adopted from the potters at the time. And what you see, it is they are oiling themselves with a mixture of olive oil and wax, and they are not strong on soap in antiquity. They are very good with oil and things like that. So that's what the boys are doing, but they are only boys. This is, of course, the way the Greek understand this kind of preparation to sport or to gymnastic. It's done between men and very open like that. You could understand also, and this remark was done by Plato himself in his one of his last dialogue, was called The Laws, that this was a kind of rather promiscuous type of surrounding, and in which homosexuality, of course, was very common. The Greek was machist, but they were also very free on homosexuality. And the remark was done as if there was a link between the gymnasium and this. And of course, we know from others, like Aristophanes or others, that says the place to look for beautiful boys for older men was the gymnasium, of course. They were going there to have an idea. And okay, now I try to bring the idea of proportion also. So you understand this first step, let's say, that this idea of the naked body, the masculine naked body, being a kind of microcosmos, is invented by the Greek, and then it have a long tradition up to now. The other idea that will be added in the 5th century, and probably under the influence of Pythagoras, it is this idea of proportion, that not only you have to represent naked body, but you have to represent it according to certain law. And I would say even certain mathematical law. And for instance, Polyclitus, who is one of the first who have tried to define that in a very precise fashion, have thought that you could, like here in this famous sculpture, it's called the Doryphoros. The Doryphoros is the one who bear a lance. Phoros is to foreign, it means to hold or to transporter, and a lance will be what he's supposed to have in his hand that you see on the right there is supposed to be a lance. It disappeared. Probably it was in metal, and it disappeared. What you see here, of course, is a Roman copy in marble of a statue was probably done in bronze by Polyclitus in the 5th century. So he had this idea to make a perfectly proportioned body. What he thought it is that if you take the height of a head and you multiplied it 7 times, you will get perfect proportion. As if you take the dimension of the head and then you put it in the chest and you go down like this, you will have 7 heads who will give you the height of the personage. And then from there, each part have to be proportioned to that, up to the little finger, let's say. Let's say another variation by the same author on the same type of sculpture, you have here what we call the diadoumenos. It comes from, it's the idea, diadomai means to tie. And so it's difficult to know exactly what is the meaning of his gesture. But we thought, say art historian and later, they thought that maybe he's tying his crown. He's a winner. And that's why you make this type of gesture near his head like this. But to me, it's you need a long, long rope, really, to tie like this. He seems to be a little bit far from his head to do that. But this is traditionally, it was called the diadoumenos. And then again, you have the same idea. Even the chest habitually fit in a square. And the foot also, when it's on the ground, the length of the foot corresponds to the height of the head. So you have a lot of these proportion of mathematics involved, in which you could say the key of the harmony of the world is in numbers. That was the intuition of Pythagoras, of course. And he says this is true for poetry, this is true for music, and it should be true also for human proportion and for sculpture. And the word number in Greek is rhythmos, like rhythm. It's interesting because rhythm, of course, you have in poetry, you have in music, and we don't think spontaneously to put it also in sculpture, but if it's number, it fits also to the same idea. Then you had, a little bit later, Lysippos. I don't know if I pronounce, I know these words, Lysippe in French, but God knows how it sounds in English, this thing. But anyway, so I put it in Greek, so everybody will be in the same, at the same level. Lysippos have made the same type of reasoning, except that instead of having 7 heads as the main canon, if you will, as the main proportion, he proposed 8 of them. So it makes much more slender type of presentation of the body, and a little bit drier also. And he used to say, well, Polyclitus show people as they are, I show them as they appear. Which is nice in a way, as if there was a kind of correction of the perfect proportion to get closer to the appearance, to what you see. So the little drawing that you have on the right to show you these difference of proportion. The gesture that this one is doing, it's also difficult to interpret what exactly he's doing, and so we think that he's using this instrument that it's called a strigil, again, strigil, who cares? And you see it quite well. It's a kind of curved piece of metal with which they scrap the body. And indeed, the title of this sculpture in Greek, it sounds very nice, apoxiomenos, but it means the scrapper. It means a guy who scrap himself from sweat and everything. So again, they don't use soap, and they use a mixture of ashes, olive oil, and I don't know what, and some perfume. So they cover their body with that, and then after they scrap it with this instrument, and that's it. You are clean for another year. you don't have anything of which close to our hygiene system. And I hope you are asking yourself now what you will do with Emily Carr after that. Okay, it's important. And I show you a last sculpture of Lysippos, where he have also made a lot of research about the opposition between lightness and darkness on sculpture and make it even more interesting in that sense. This is a kind of representation of Hermes, or if you want in Latin, Mercury, with his very fast sandal, and he's the messenger of the god, so he goes, he rests now on a piece of it. Okay, so then I ask myself, what about Emily Carr and the nude, you see? Is it a subject that she ever even touched, you know? And the answer was hard to find. The first thing she says herself, she says, we were prime prude, she says. And we were her and their sisters, because she had few sisters, had never been taught to think of our naked body as something beautiful, only as something indecent, something to be hidden. So this is not surprising in the type of upbringing. Their parents were very religious, especially the father was very severe. He was Episcopalian, and he wanted to have a lot of principles and all that. He's described sometimes as almost a tyrant also, say, a very authoritarian type. And on this subject, I guess there was no way to fool around. And when you see the education she went through, because she went to at least 3 famous art schools, you ask yourself, how did she react to model class, for instance? Because, of course, it was part of the education of any artist at the time. The first place she went, in San Francisco, in the School of Art there, she refused to attend model class. That solved the problem. She followed portrait class, color, things like that, but nothing with nude model. Then, in 1899, she went to England, and she went to Westminster School of Art. Westminster School of Art was very, very traditional. It was a little bit what I've known myself in the very early days of École des Beaux-Arts. You see, the first year 3 years you were only learning drawing, no color. Color is just something you add at the end, but drawing all the time. And then the first thing you used to draw, you used to copy reproduction, and then the famous plasters, you see, that we had in schools, representing in plasters whatever Greek statues and things like that we have to copy in black and white, because then you didn't have color. You just have to understood the so-called values, the transition between dark and light, and to do it smoothly and all that. And finally, when you have mastered all this, you could attend to class with a model. This type of education comes from the academy, of course, of the 17th, 18th century. And I don't have a picture of what it was at the Westminster School, because with my French education, I guess I thought right away of, for instance, the class of Jean-Louis David. David was a kind of famous neoclassic painter in France during the time of the Revolution. Quite an interesting man, but and following all in a very difficult time in 1789, all that. And here you see on the left, you see a representation of his studio in the Louvre, and you see maybe at the back completely a man with a top hat. This is David, and he's near a student, and he tell him more or less what to do. You see, he draw even on his drawing. I guess that students of today will not appreciate that their teacher in studio will come on their painting and say, you don't know what to do, I will finish it for you. But but David is exactly doing that. He is with a pencil, and what they look at is a model, of course, who stand like this for 20 minutes. It's terrible jobs, by the way, and because you have to be still, and then you have all these students around, having each one a different angle. I suspect that the one you see, the kind of statue that you see on the right is not a model, is a marble or something, or maybe a plaster. You see that they could copy also. And on the wall, up there on the left, you see the painting that I show you on the right, which is a representation of Hector during the War of Troy. As you know, Hector was killed by Achilles, and he was carried by his feet like this behind horses to show that they succeeded to kill him among the Greeks. This is a part of the Iliad, let's say, of Homer. And it gives you the type of atmosphere of this studio, in which probably at Westminster School, where Emily Carr went in England, was probably very close to that in terms of here is even a more older representation of the same type of class, meaning that it have not changed much. At the time, you use the word academy for both things, for the place where you learn, but also for the type of drawing you are making there. In academy, it's also a painting of a nude model, habitually masculine also. And that's what you see here. Is they're all sitting around and having hang on the wall all their masterpieces. And this 1760, you see, so it's about middle of 18th century. So this is really the tradition in which she was trained. And we have one drawing, apparently, that come from that. Oh, no, I wanted just to add this, yeah. Then I asked myself, okay, what is the class that she followed in Westminster School of Art? 3 classes, one of commercial art, one with dress model, and then one with nude, let's say nude model, but in a segregated class just for girls. That's also, it's interesting. You have access to model, but you are only between girls. You have no boys around to make stupid remarks and things like that. So they were segregating the 2 groups like this. And the teacher of the model class of Emily Carr is this guy, Monsieur William Loudun, very obscure painter, never heard of him, I don't know. And the internet is a wonderful tool. You put a name like this and right away you get these examples of what he's doing. Well, I have not much information about this painting, but it gives you an idea of the type of painting that a teacher could do. He called the one on the left, all is beautiful, okay. Maybe it's a very masculine point of view, but anyway. And the other one, why he called it the mistletoe, don't ask me, I have no idea. Yeah, maybe there's a mistletoe somewhere hidden. I have no idea. And so it's a very academic type of upbringing, you could say, with all the rules and all. Nothing to do with Impressionism in England. She was not at all touched by that because this school rejected it completely. And with teachers like that who were, say, for instance, certainly an admirator of Gainsborough or Reynolds or something, say, attaching himself to the English tradition, I could see she was in a kind of safe milieu. She will have, and then, yeah, that's it. We have one example of drawing, of rather charcoal, let's say, done by her. It's a self-portrait, where I think this is the maximum she went in the direction of presenting at least herself like a model. We know for sure that it's a self-portrait because it has been in the hand of one of her relatives, Elizabeth Lauren, who have it since the beginning, and it was only recently put on sale at Eiffel, and it comes from a collection where really there's no problem of attribution. So this is one rare example of an Emily Carr who could be close to my subject of today. Then she went to Paris. And then she was exposed to very different type of painting. I give you again an example of the production of her teacher in Paris. They were Anglophone, of course, that were working there and attracting students from Canada or United States or from England with the two advantages, to have the English language, but also to have the atmosphere of what Emily Carr called the wicked Paris. So I tried to find example of nudes of both of them because they were painting also landscape and still life and things of that nature. And one was called John Duncan Ferguson, you see it on the left, and the other, Monsieur Henry Gibb, obviously more influenced by Gauguin, I would say. And this one a little bit looking from far at Cubism, but in a very prudent way still. But at least I think their function was to open Emily Carr to the so-called modern art. That's where she got the influence, let's say, of Fauvism in particular. It is when she was in Paris with these people. She made a comment about this type of painting, and especially of Gibbs' one. She says, Mr. Gibbs' landscape and still life delighted me, brilliant, luscious, clean. Against the distortion of his nudes, I felt revolved. So it's interesting because she says, okay, when he was painting landscape, and I have no problem with still life and landscape, but his nude was terrible because there was a kind of distortion of human body. I was asking myself what she would have reacted if she saw Les Demoiselles d'Avignon of Picasso, who after all, in 1907, but of course, it was not easy to see Les Demoiselles at the time. They were in private hands, or with Picasso, or with Monsieur Doucet, and it was not easy to get to it. But again, this idea of when you treat the human body, you should not distort so much. And she had an interesting remarks, because after all, she have been among Indians, and she have seen how they treat themselves, the human body, which is not at all realistic and could be described as distorted also. And then what she adds, Indian distorted both human and animal forms, but they distorted with meaning, for emphasis, and with great sincerity. Here, I felt distortion was often used for design or in an effort to shock rather than convince. As if so the transposition, let's say, of human body that you could have in Picasso or in our teacher were done without sincerity, just to shock and just to make the public on at ease, if you want. And on the contrary, she saw in the way that the First Nation artists were dealing with a subject of human body, noble and sincere and without any problem. And it's there indeed that you will find a way to see this theme treated through the art of Emily Carr. It is through the sculpture of the Indian that you will discover that are uninhibited, let's say, about this famous subject that was so difficult for her. And that's why I think we should go to this specific sculpture to deal with her relationship with the theme, but also with all the implication of this figure that you see here. This painting was done in the 1928-1930 period. This is important to understand what it is. She was almost unknown completely in Canada, let's say before that time. And she had the opportunity to exhibit in Ottawa in a big show. It was showing, let's say, it was called something like Western Coast Art, Native and Modern. I will speak of it in a lecture to come in more detail, but just to give you an idea. This exhibition was organized by Eric Brown of the National Gallery in Ottawa and by Marius Barbeau, a famous anthropologist. And they have met just before 1927, where the exhibition was organized. They have met Emily Carr, and they have found that she has tons of those paintings relating with subject of Indian subject, and they said, wow, this is great, we should include that in our show. And the show was, in fact, a kind of confrontation between modern artists and some artifacts coming from the Indian community, well, most of them from museum already collected and all that, and trying to see a kind of dialogue between them. And because of this exhibition in Ottawa, she was invited to come in the East, like she says. And then she met some famous painter of the Group of Seven, and in particular, Lauren Harris. And it's on her way back to Vancouver that she painted that painting in 1928. Just after this shock of meeting with this Group of Seven people and being very enthusiastic about their project of making at last a real Canadian art, something that will be for us only and will express our values and all that. She was very enthusiastic with that, and on her way back, she painted this Sonoqua from Guyas Dom. And it's based on a drawing, well, on a kind of watercolor that she done much before in 1912, one of her visits on the Vancouver Island among the different Indian community. And so she take this drawing out of her drawer and make the painting now. And it's interesting that so much time between the two, 1912 and 1928, as if she needed the shock of the Group of Seven, let's say, to be able to deal with a subject matter like this one, which you see a kind of naked lady with big pendulous breast and with no clothes whatsoever and all that, as if this subject was too tough. But now that she has been revalorized, in fact, by this contact with these people, with Lauren Harris in particular, who says to her, you are a great artist, you have a specific voice in the endeavor that we try to do. We are dealing with landscape, but you are the only one who deal with the roots of culture in Canada, and he was praising her for that, you see, as if she has a niche for herself in the endeavor of the Group of Seven. And so having acquired this kind of this strength, if you want, she went back to one of her old drawings and decided to make something of it. The place that she's mentioning, Guyasdom, it's, just to situate you a little bit, it's here on Guildford Island. So you have the Vancouver Island here, and almost to the north of it, you have this place where she visited. You remember last time, I think I spoke of Howard Bay? It's nearby. It's all these community of Kwakiutl people. She was visiting one after the other, and she made these aquarelle, this watercolor on the spot, and then she accumulated like this, I would say, a documentation that she could use after. That was the place where she was. Guyasdom was a kind of weird village for somebody who didn't know the usage of Kwakiutl, because it looks like completely abandoned. The Kwakiutl make a difference between two types of village, winter village and summer one. In the summer, you live a place where you could fish a lot and you could get food, you could take care of your subsistence. During the winter, it's a time for the ceremony, and you do it in another village. So when she came to Guyasdom, it was abandoned. It was a winter village during the summer, so there was nobody there. So she described it as a rather a little bit scary place because there's nobody, and you see these sculptures here and there, the totem and all that. But, and then we think we have found exactly her source, because from old photograph, you see exactly the same personage. The Sonoqua in front of now, we know even the name of the owner of the house that is behind it. And probably it was very close to what she saw. We have other photo of this, of the same subject, but I'm not sure it's the same personage because the surroundings seem so different here. And this photo is done by a man called Curtis, who is a very famous photographer that went through all United States and Canada at the time to photograph Indians and published 10 big volumes on it. Fantastic photos, and sometimes, of course, quite interesting in terms of anthropology, in terms of ethnology. And so here what I suspect, he saw what we see on the left, and then he decided to clean the bushes to get a proper view of the sculpture. And that's why you have, it's the same sculpture, but one is complete and the other is just half. When Emily Carr speaks of her encounter with this Tsonokua, she does it in her book. It's called Kliwik. Kliwik, you remember, is the name that the Indian used to give to her, the one who laughed, the one who doesn't speak but laugh. And I put back the picture just to accompany, I would say, the description that she does of this encounter, because it's really like that, of the Tsonokua by Emily Carr in Kliwik. She says, water was in the air, half mist, half rain. Well, this is the climate, of course, around Vancouver Island, so it's not surprising. The stinging nettles, higher than my head, left their nervous mark on my ears and forehead as I beat my way through them, trying all the while to keep my feet on the plank walk which they hid. Big yellow slugs crawl on the walk and slime it. My feet slipped, and I shot headlong to her very base, for she had no feet. The nettles that were above my head reached only to her knee. It was not the fall alone that jerked the whole out of me, for the great wooden image towering above me was indeed terrifying. The nettled bed ended a few yards beyond her, and then a rocky bluff jutted out with waves battering it below. I scrambled up and went out on the bluff so that I could see the creature above the nettles. The forest was behind her, the sea in front. Her head and trunk were carved out, or rather into, the bole of a great red cedar. She seems to be part of the tree itself, as if she had grown there at its heart, and the carver had only chipped away the outer wood so that you could see her. This is, of course, almost a quotation of what Michelangelo used to say about sculpture. So the statue is in the marble. You just have to remove what is around to get it, you know. Her arms were spliced and socket to the trunk and were flung wide in a circling, compelling movement. Her breasts were two eagle's heads, fiercely carved. That much, and the column of her great neck and her strong chin, I had seen when I slid her to the ground beneath her. Now I saw her face. The eyes were two rounds of black, set in wider rounds of white, and placed in deep socket under wide black eyebrows. Their fixed stare bore into me as the very life of the whole cedar looked out, and it seems that the voice of the tree itself might have burst from the great round cavity with projecting lips that was her mouth. Her ears were round and stuck out to catch all sounds. The salt air had not dimmed the heavy red of her trunk and arms and thighs. Her hands were black with blunt fingertips painted a dazzling white. I stood looking at her for a long, long time. And it's an extraordinary description, of course, of an encounter with a sculpture that have made a fantastic impression on her. It's almost like St. Paul on the way to Damascus. You fell from and you see suddenly this sculpture, which is, in fact, when she will learn what is the Tsonokua, it's a personage who's rather ambivalent in the mythology of the Kwakiutl. It is, in fact, a wild woman of the forest, huge, and she have no eyes, but her eyes just are like coal burning, I would say. She's described like this, and she's very sleepy habitually. She closes her eyes, but when she opened them, you just see like fire, like coal. And the other thing she does also is to make hoo, hoo, hoo. She makes sounds like this, and that's why she have a round mouth like this. And she's famous for taking little children to run in the bushes after dark and bringing them to her children who have strong beaks and eat them. This is a very useful legend, you see, to get your children to bed in time. So if you go too much, too late, the Tsonokuwa will come and she will eat you. So it's a kind of rather, when she says it was a frightening sight, well, she didn't maybe knew at the time what it was, but she had, she was close to the real feeling of what this creature was supposed to create. It was supposed to be a frightening sight. She's represented, of course, in numerous aspects of the heart of the Indian. Let's say, for instance, here you have a chief mask. So that is during a part of the potlatch ceremony, you have the Tsonokuwa is involved. And the chief will wear this mask of the Tsonokuwa. You recognize her. She have sleep, she have a hollow cheek, and she have also this mouth like this to make the sounds. Even the hair that she have in front of her, it's to show a little bit that she's shy. Willie Seaweed, the sculptor who made the mask was still living and have been interviewed and all that. We know exactly what he wanted to express and what he wanted to do. But these masks were used, so in the potlatch ceremony, the guy was dressed with a grizzly bear fur, and he wore this mask, and he had on his back a kind of bag in which he held the coppers. The coppers are, I show you one example here on the left. It is indeed, it's called like that because it's done in copper, and it's supposed to be a symbol of the riches of the chief. And you can see a chief, Willie Seaweed, the author of the mask, with a nice smile of, this is a rich man. You have his two coppers, you have one complete and one almost half, and the one he have on his right hand is the one that you see in color on the left. It's the same one. And it was, let's say, cut with this type of instrument that you see on the bottom on the right, who is a knife, but in wood. Because before the introduction of the metal tool, the Indian used wood or this native copper that they could find and just hammer with stone and create like this with rather beautiful design. But the idea of the copper, it is richness. It is as if you can exchange a copper against a lot of things. And it shows how rich you are. And as I told you, the potlatch is a kind of competition of richness. It's one group inviting the other and showing them their power by their wealth. Instead of fighting, it's a rather a nice way to vent aggressivity. So you do it through commerce in a way. And so the chief with this mask go through the other chief and distribute to each one coppers that correspond to their richness, let's say. And he create like this a hierarchy between all of them. So that's why you find indeed many examples of this mask of the Tsonokuwa. And here it's interesting because Chief Mungo Martin is a very famous sculptor also. He's in the photo on the right. And there you see the whole costume. I'll just show you. I don't have my little arrow. Here in the middle, if you go my finger up, you see black. It looks like a gorilla a little bit, but it's a grizzly bear suit with, on the top, the mask that I show you on the left. And what happened with these masks during the time of 1912, 1920s and all that, potlatch ceremony was forbidden by the law. The missionary hated it. They says they spoil goods and it's ridiculous the way they do. And sometimes they are so enthusiastic that they even burn the whole house. So it's ridiculous. It's a usage that should be condemned and all that. And indeed, in the Canadian law, potlatch was, for a big while, completely forbidden. What happened? they went to the community, and all these paraphernalia that you see there, all these masks, were confiscated. Some of them were just burned, because the perception of it was probably, this is not art, this is curios, this is just a crazy form that have no meaning. Or sometimes, when anthropologists were involved, they were collected, and you find them suddenly in piles and piles in museum in Ottawa. And I remember to have visited not the Victoria Museum, say on Metcalfe, where you see few of them, but you have to go to the warehouse, and then you realize what happened. Tons of these things are piled there still, even if the community of today are claiming back these artifacts. And it's not for nothing that this mask is now in Umista Cultural Center in Allard Bay. And in between, let's say, you see it here again on the left, the same mask, but now have been collected, let's see, by this William Halliday, who is an Indian agent, and brought to museum in Ottawa or in Quebec, in Montreal, wherever. And all these masks are seen as I told you, kind of curiosity, and since they are linked to the potlatch ceremony, they are forbidden, and they are confiscated. And in 1922, they could have been destroyed, but here in this case, it went back to the community in Allard Bay. And Chief Robert Joseph have told in a very emotional way the meaning it was for the community of Allard Bay in the 80s, in 1980, very recently, to get back these masks that were confiscated from them a long time ago. He says, I saw the tears among the young and the old in 1980 as we celebrated the opening of the Humista Cultural Center in Allard Bay. Ceremonial regalia, including dozens of masks, which have been illegally acquired by the Indian agent in 1922, was repatriated to Allard Bay from museums in Eastern Canada. From museum in Eastern Canada. They were so collected, they were displayed in museum and all that. Our people gathered to celebrate the emotional return of the artifacts to our newly built museum. Tears flows in joy and relief as we welcome back ancient masks and other treasures. So the meaning, finally, if you go back to the painting of Émilie Carr, of this personage of Tsonoukwa, is interesting because you see that it's linked to the whole mythology, let's say, of the Kwakiutl people, and also to their ceremony and to the potlatch and all that. Even if Émilie Carr didn't felt all that in details, let's see, mind you, she will speak with anthropologists and she will finally acquire this type of knowledge. She had, I think, made a kind of spontaneous association between the Tsonoukwa and her. And she's not the only one to have done that at the time. There's another of her friend, who's called Herma Gunther, who was a famous anthropologist of Washington University, who used to sign also a letter to Tsonoukwa. As if they felt two things there. They felt the modern aspect of the modern form, let's say, because it's so different from what she learned at school and all that. It's like, and it goes in the movement, let's say, of today, of what we call primitivism, where you try to renew art by dealing with form borrowed from the so-called primitive cultures. But there was also the feminine dimension of this image that was important. It was a representation of female body, but also of a powerful figure, not somebody weak or different. And I think Émilie Carr felt the both things, felt the fact that it is something in terms of modern art was interesting and maybe even more advanced than what the guys of the Toronto were ready to do with their landscape. Maybe she was dealing now with some subject matter was more challenging. And also, I think, because of this powerful image of the woman that was expressed there also. And the proof of this is also that after you find her looking for this image of the Tsunokwa in her trips, going from one place to the other, and trying to find other image, and also to paint them and to introduce them in her own picture. In the chapter of the book, in her book Kliwick, I think it's chapter 9, if I remember well, you have 3 encounters with the Tsunokwa who are told. The first one I told you already in Goya's Dom, but she have others. She speak of another encounter with the Tsunokwa in Saxis. This is the Indian name, but let's say it was called Fort Rupert in her time. And you have a photo here of the village that you will visit. Fort Rupert is also on the Vancouver Island, more to the north than Allard Bay, more to the north of Goya's Dom that I was showing you before, just almost to the tip of the Vancouver Island, just to situate you where it is. And here this photo is rather old, 1881. When she will visit this place in 1912, it will be much more, it will be quite different from there. In particular, what happened there, it is that slowly the native destroyed their big houses, like the one you see on the right, the big communal houses, to be replaced by modern houses, who are habitually much smaller and for one family only, and not for a big group like the whole houses were. So some of these houses will be indeed demolished. And she made this watercolor here. It's called Fort Rupert, where you see in the foreground one of these houses who have been demolished. And what is left, it's only the huge beams and the house post also. Some of them in the shape of raven, let's say, that you see on the left. And 2 others that we see only from the back, but you will see I have another watercolor where you see them from the front. And about this big house, and through the house who have been demolished, where only the posts are left, you see the modern village with the small houses and no more big community house. And even if some totem poles are still in place, the little houses on the horizon there shows that there was big change. And she explained it very clearly. She said there were Indians in this village. Oh yeah, in the contrary that what happened in the previous village, this one was inhabited. There was people there, she said. And in a mild backward way, it was going modern. That is, the Indian had pushed the forest back a little to let the sun touch the new buildings that were replacing the whole community houses. Small houses, primitive enough to a white man's thinking, push here and there between the whole. It's exactly what you see in this aquarelle, in this watercolor. If you go then to this one, was on display 2 weeks ago at Eiffel, I saw that and I said, oh my God, I have to include that in my lecture. This is the same house that we just saw, but from the other direction. You remember, you have the 2 raven, but the 2 other poles that are on the right there as the one that you see here. And that's why on the top there, you have a big beam, who doesn't make sense at first when you see that. What is this? On the top of the left figure, you have a beam going like nowhere. But this is because now she took a view from in front of the same house who have been demolished, who are almost demolished, and in which, of course, to her surprise, she got 2 Tsunokwa, one beside the other. One on the left and the other on the right, one holding one skull and the other holding 2 skulls. These are the kids that were not nice, and they finished like this, of course, she held them. And you have all the other characteristics of the Tsunokwa, the big mouth and the profound eyes. And they are standing on figuration of grizzly bear eating children also. So really it's not, and this is, you can imagine, it's inside of the house. It's house post. So it's a very good, clever way to get peace at 8 o'clock in the evening. Huh? Okay. She says, where some of the big community houses had been torn down for the sake of the lumber The great corner post and massive roof beams of the whole structure were often left standing naked against the sky, and the new little houses were built inside on the spot where the whole one has been. But this was her second encounter with a Tsunokua, and here again, she was very impressed by this power. She says she doesn't feel ferocity in them, even if they are holding skulls and all that. She could have maybe interpreted it that way, but she finds especially this element of power, and that's underlined what I just said. They were, for instance, photograph also, these two sculpture. You see now George Hunt, one of the early anthropologists, in front of the same post, but there the house completely disappeared. I suspect that the photo was done later when these house posts are now transformed in totem. They are not, you understand, they are not really totem. They are just sculpture inside of the house, but then when everything of the house is disappearing, you just have left, it looks like a totem pole. This is the one on the left in the watercolor of Emily Carr with one skull. And she have also made different watercolors of each element of it, like the grizzly bear eating a child, and the other one with the two skulls this time. And now I think what she's doing, in a way, it's transforming them into sculpture. You lose their meaning in a way of their function. What you get is just a form, a sculpture, which is interesting as such, but for instance, with the grizzly, you don't suspect that there was somebody above his head, that it could be another. If you saw only this picture, you cannot deduce that there was another sculpture above it. And the same with the Tsunokua, you don't, she seems to be isolated like a sculpture. And she spoke of it as if, again, she says, I recognized her right away when I saw her. I knew her by her stuck-out ears, shouting mouth, and deep eye sockets. These sockets have no eyeballs, but very empty holes. She knows more and more about the Tsunokua. Filled with stare. The stare, through not so fierce as that of the former image, was more intense. Okay, she described it not like fearful, but intense. Her feet were planted heavily on the head of a squatting bear, carved beneath them. A man could have sat on either huge shoulder. She was unpainted, weather-worn, sun-cracked, and the arms and the hands seemed to hang loosely. The fingers were thrust into the carven mouth of two human heads, held crowned down. From behind, the sun made unfathomable shadow in eyes, cheek, and mouth. Horrors tumbled out of them. Always this feeling of very powerful figure, very even scary one thing. So this is the second encounter with a Tsunokua, adding to what she had in the first was like, I would say, kind of a revelation. Now she began to get more and more shape. The third one is more ambiguous. It's done in Quatsino, or Xwatis in their language, and it's called the Tsunokua of the Cat Village. It's based on a charcoal drawing that I show you on the left, and it's probably done from the sculpture that you see on the right. But then there is a problem. According to recent anthropologists, this is not the Tsunokua. This that we see on the right, that was her source of inspiration for the painting and the charcoal, is the McNair, another one, I forget his name, I think, Howie Stewart, J. Stewart. Both of them were published recently, catalogs on the, it's called To the Totem Forest, Emily Carr and Contemporaries Interprets. They says Carr is mistaken. The inside house posts represent a noble male ancestor of the Guiskimak family, which owned the house and the privilege. He is holding a copper under his left arm and is wearing a Sisiutal dress. Okay, The copper, you can see it, I think, even if I go back to her picture, what she have under the arm is one of this copper that I mentioned before. So this is not a very good argument, because indeed the Tsunokwa is the guardian of the coppers. So it could be. But what she's lacking, of course, is the kind of round mouth that she used to have, and also this kind of hair dress who's a little bit strange, who was not at all in the other representation, and what he called a sisiutul dress. I will show you. And here, if you look at the photo, she holds also a copper, much smaller, a little like a baby copper, I would say she have in her hand. And she have the same type of headdress and the same type of mouth also, only maybe deep-setted eyes, but not so much close to the Tsunokwa. On the other, okay, and the sisiutul, I will show you what it is. It's a kind of mythical serpent who have a head at each end of his body and a middle head in the middle. And above the head, you have these little ears like this that make it, and it's a very dangerous animal. It transforms in stone whatever he touch. So it's of course a sign of power. And so the fact that she is wearing this also seems bizarre in her iconography. Let's see, we don't expect it there. Mind you, I found one example in which you have the Tsunokwa with the sisiutul. And again, it's a sculpture by Willie Seaweed. It's a totem pole model, so that means it's a small little thing. It's not about this size. And I don't think the totem was never built according to this design, but he made a model, and you have, in the middle, you have the Tsunokwa. You recognize her with her mouth and her closed eyes. This is very typical. And she's standing on what seems to be at the very bottom, seems to be a whale design. She has a big mouth like this with teeth, and her tail is drawn on the basis on which she stands. You see the design in black of her tail horizontally on the little stone on which she is. And then above, and she holds in her hands a child who seems to be quite afraid. And if I was him, I will be afraid too. He looks like this. He really, you see it, She holds it in her hand like this, a little personage who is supposed to be a child that the Tsunokwa have caught and will bring to her children. Above her head, you have the sisiutul. You have this big double-head serpent with the middle head and above all this, you have one of the mythical bird who's called the colus. It's mythical. It's not a thunderbird, but it's kind of another of these mythological birds. So in this, the association of sisiutul and Tsunokwa makes sense. So maybe after all, Émilie Carr was not completely wrong. But whatever was her interpretation, in the same village, she could see authentic representation of the Tsunokwa, like you see here, for instance. What I show you on the right, it is a photograph of Quazzino, of the same place, in which you see the two sculptures that we have on the watercolor of Émilie Carr, the grizzly bear and the Tsunokwa. And you see people trying to understand this in the photo. They are in front of it. I think it's clear. The Tsunokwa is here, and the grizzly bear is there, and there's two anthropologists who looks like this. I don't know why, but and so nearby there was also, and she painted them, she saw them, there was also this representation. But of course, what was more striking for her was this representation. I tried to find, she described, okay, the third encounter with the Tsunokwa. What she saw is this, and she explained also why she called it with a cat village. It says, like the Tsunokwa of the other villages, she was carved into the bole of a red cedar tree. She appears to be neither wooden nor stationary, but a singing spirit, young and fresh, passing through the jungle. No violence coarsen her, no power domineer to wither her. She was graciously feminine. I sat down to sketch. What was the noise of purring and rubbing going on about my feet? Cats. They jumped into my lap and sprang to my shoulders. They were real and very female, very feminine, pardon. There we were, Tsonoqua, the cats, and I, the woman who only a moment ago had forced herself to come behind the house in trembling fear of the wild woman of the woods, wild in the sense that the creatures of the forest are wild, shy, untouchable. So then suddenly she saw this feminine aspect of the Tsonoqua, if you want, in her perception in this one, even if it's not true, even if my anthropologists of McNair and Stewart are right that she mistook this for another thing, I think whatever her interpretation, now she had a kind of another dimension to the Tsonoqua image. She even commented on the fact that the Sioux-Uttle on her make kind of nice separation of hair on the top like this, and she found it feminine. Probably it was close to the fashion at the time in Victoria or in Vancouver, but anyway, this have changed a lot since. And so then she had a kind of another dimension to it. And so if you summarize it a little bit, I think she made more and more with time a kind of identification with the Tsonoqua. This mixture of power and femininity on one hand, and also this kind of bold design. And maybe in this also, the fact that she attached so much power to this figure is a way to react against her own upbringing. I told you in the beginning that they were repressed in a way. When she says we were prime prude and we were told that the human body is ugly and we have to hide it and all that. In her diary, there is a passage which is quite ambiguous in which she speaks of her father, the guy, all religious that he was, put in his head to explain to his daughter how babies get born, where babies come from, the bees and the stork story. And I don't know what he says, but he shocked her immensely with this. And look what she wrote in her diary. It was not published in her official diary, but we have it. We have access of it through her writing. Coming near the end of a big family, I could only know a cross-good, gouty, sexy old man who hurt and disgusted me. She speaks of her father. Yeah. I resented his omnipotence, his selfishness, and I was frightened of him. He knew he had hurt and frightened me, telling me things a happy, innocent child should not hear, and telling them in a low and blatant manner. I couldn't forgive father. I just could not for spoiling all the loveliness of life with that bestial brutalness of explanation, filling me with horror instead of gently explaining the glorious beauty of reproduction, the holiness and the joy of it. So this is a very traumatic experience. She lost her father at 15. So in the middle of her teen, that's what she kept memory of him. And I think in this figure of the Tsonoqua, where there was so much power expressed, even at the last one, that she will, the same personality, she finished with this representation, the same ones, seen from another angle. Now she gives this more gentle look that she described in her text. But even that, she makes this kind of synthesis of all this mixture of femininity and power in this Tsonoqua image. And that's why I think not only she identified to it, but she identified to the power also, to maybe the resentment she had against her education. And she could then maybe overcome it through this picture that have accompanied her, in fact, in all her life. She described 3 encounters in Kliwik, but she was always confronted with this image, and she kept it in herself. Okay, so that was Emily Carr and the nude. And okay, so next time we will deal with the uncanny. Okay.